The market was alive that Saturday morning, traders calling out prices, customers bargaining, children weaving through stalls with laughter and dust at their heels. In the middle of the noise, Xinhua stood carefully arranging tomatoes with the precision of someone who understood that even small actions carried dignity. She was focused, humble, and determined, unaware that her about to shatter, because at that exact moment, 3 luxury cars rolled to a stop outside the market, doors opening like a scene from a movie. Adana stepped out first, designer shoes, perfect hair, and the smug confidence of a girl who had never heard the word struggle. Her friends flanked her, soaking in the attention as the market fell silent. Chin looked up, recognizing her instantly from school, but said nothing. She simply continued arranging her mother's goods. Adana smirked. She walked over, inspecting Xinhua the way one might inspect a cracked bowl at a roadside stall. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, she mocked Xinhua's worn dress, her family, and the fact that she smelled like onions and poverty. Laughter erupted. For a moment the world stood still. Chin refused to cry, but the wound was deep. Xinhua's days began before the first cock crowed, long before the sun spilled its gold across the rooftops of their small community. She would rise quietly so as not to wake her mother, wash her face with cold water drawn the night before, and begin preparing for another day of juggling books, market duties, and a scholarship at a school designed for children who grew up with chandeliers and drivers. The room she shared with her mother was small but clean, with a single metal window that allowed morning air to roll in. On the wall above her bed hung her biggest motivation, a framed photograph of her late father, smiling gently, holding her as a baby. Whenever her strength wavered, she looked at that picture and reminded herself she was not just working for the present, but for the future of a family that had already endured loss. Her mother, Mama Xinhua, was a woman molded by hardship but not defeated by it. She had once been married to a truck driver who dreamed of sending his daughter to the best schools in the state, but fate had rewritten that dream sooner than expected. After his sudden passing, she took over their tiny vegetable stall in the city market. Some women would have shrunk into survival mode, but she worked with dignity, selling tomatoes, spinach, onions, and seasonal produce with the pride of someone who knew that honest labor was not shameful. Xinhua inherited that pride not by words, but by watching her mother wipe sweat from her forehead and smile at customers even when her heart was heavy. Their bond was the quiet kind, strengthened by shared struggle, softened by mutual respect, and guided by a shared dream of seeing Xinhua rise above their circumstances without forgetting them. Every morning after helping prepare goods for the stall, Jane would gather her school bag and begin the long walk to the main road. Sometimes she would catch a bus, sometimes she would walk the entire distance. She never complained. The scholarship she received to attend elite international college was one of the few openings the world had offered, as she intended to honor it. That school, with its well-polished floors, marble pillars, and classrooms filled with children driven to school in SUVs, was a completely different universe from the place she came from. In the hallway, she was often the only student who didn't carry a designer backpack or own a costly phone. On her first day, when she placed her exercise books neatly on her classroom desk, her fingers trembling with both pride and fear, she could feel the stares. Some students smiled politely. Others smirked, as though her presence was some sort of comedy act. But Xinhua had learned young that self-worth could not be printed on price labels, and she held her chin up with quiet strength among the students at that school. One name stood above the rest: Adana Okoro. She was the girl everyone wanted to befriend, not because she was kind but because she came from wealth and power. Her father owned several companies. Her mother was a renowned businesswoman who graced magazine covers and corporate seminars. Adana behaved as though she owned the school itself. Wherever she walked, people moved out of the way. Whatever she said was accepted without question. Teachers handled her like a delicate vase that must never fall. She had 3 girls who followed her like shadows, echoing her thoughts and protecting her reputation the way royal guards protect a crown. Adana understood the influence she held and used it fearlessly. She enjoyed spotlight, admiration, and control, but more than that, she enjoyed superiority. From Chinwe's first week, Adana sensed that her presence was different. Chinwe did not cower, did not try to impress, and did not bend herself into the shape of someone desperate for acceptance. She paid attention in class, handed in assignments ahead of time, and gained the respect of teachers without seeking it. This silent confidence irritated Adana far more than open defiance would have. In her mind, a girl from the market was supposed to understand the natural order of things. She believed that wealth equaled dominance and that students like Shinoa should be grateful just to be breathing the same expensive air. Despite the tension, Chinwe kept her focus. After school, she returned home, changed her uniform for a simple dress, and hurried to the market to help her mother. Her classmates went to swimming lessons, music tutors, and foreign language classes. Chinwe stacked baskets, washed vegetables, and smiled at customers as evening swallowed the sky. She was tired most days, but her heart was strong. Every coin she earned, every book she finished, every sacrifice she made was a step forward. She saw her life like climbing a long hill, slow, demanding, and unglamorous, but she knew that when she reached the top, the view would be worth it. Still, no amount of strength could fully shield her from the cruelty that sometimes slipped through the cracks of her composure. In school quarters, she heard whispers disguised as giggles. In classrooms, she caught glances exchanged between students who believed their wealth entitled them to mock someone else's sincerity. And although Chinwe never responded publicly, the words stayed with her, not because she believed them, but because she wished the world was kinder. She often wondered how much easier life might have been if wealth came packaged with humility. But she also knew that her foundation, built from sweat and resilience, was stronger than any polished marble floor. Then came that Saturday, a day no different from others at first. Chinwe tied her hair with a simple ribbon, packed tomatoes into bowls, and followed her mother to their stall. She laughed with a neighboring trader about market gossip, helped a child pick fresh greens, and began counting change for a customer. The world was ordinary until the sound of foreign car engines sliced through the marketplace noise. When she looked up and saw Adana pressing the car door open, fear was not her first emotion, confusion was. Why would the queen of elite international college be here, in the dusty market, in broad daylight? Chinwe kept working, pretending not to notice. But fate had decided to silence the market that morning. Everyone turned. Every eye settled on Adana. And before anyone could breathe, she walked toward Chin with a smile sharp enough to cut pride and innocence in one stroke. What happened next? The humiliation? The echoes of laughter, the silence of grown adults who should have intervened, marked a turning point in both their lives. But in that moment, Chinwe did not yet understand that their worlds were already more connected than either girl realized. Their families, their futures, and the consequences of that market encounter were about to collide in ways neither could escape. The following Monday morning, Chin walked into elite international college with the quiet dignity that had always been her shield. Her uniform was clean, pressed neatly by her mother the night before, her hair tied into a simple braid that fell over one shoulder. But no matter how carefully she prepared herself, she could already feel the weight of eyes on her. Whispers rippled through the hallways like waves. That's the market girl. Did you see her last Saturday? I heard Adana mocked her. Chinwe knew exactly what they meant, but she refused to flinch. She walked with her head high, her gaze steady, her hands clutching her books as though they were shields against the world. Even before the first bell rang, word of the market incident had traveled faster than Chinwe could have imagined. Some students had seen the cars, the designer shoes, the way Adana had strutted past her with that cruel smile. Others had heard the laughter, the insults, the sharpness of Adana's voice cutting through the morning air. The story had grown with each retelling. In some versions, Chinwe had been reduced to tears. In others, she had collapsed to the ground. The truth, of course, was simpler. She had stood tall, collected her dignity, and returned home silently. But the rumors did not care for truth. They thrived on spectacle. By the time Chine reached her locker, a small crowd had gathered, giggling under their breath. Adana's friends were among them, whispering and pointing in a way that made it clear they expected Chinua to feel embarrassed, to falter, to apologize for existing in the same space as their queen. Chinua opened her locker with slow, deliberate movements, pretending not to notice, her heart pounding in her chest but her expression calm. She knew that any reaction, even a simple glance, would be twisted into another story for the next round of whispers. Her first class was mathematics with Mr. Ez, a stern but fair teacher who had a reputation for recognizing both talent and effort. As Chino took her seat, she noticed Adana slipping in moments later, her designer bag hanging perfectly from her shoulder, her hair shining as if lit from within. Adana's gaze found Chenwa immediately, and Chenwa felt it like a physical weight, assessing, calculating, judging. She ignored it, focused on her notebook, flipping to the page where she had solved a complex algebra problem the night before, but the tension was palpable. At the back of the classroom, a few students snickered quietly whenever Shin made a move. Every small gesture she made, adjusting her pen, flipping a page, glancing at the board, was scrutinized, dissected and discussed. Chinui felt the familiar prick of awareness, the old sensation of being different, being other. She reminded herself quietly, her value was not in their eyes. It was in her effort, her persistence, and her integrity. By the second period, the whispers had escalated. A group of girls leaned close, speaking just loud enough for Shingmud to hear. "I heard Adana said you smell like onions from the market." Another added, "Do you even belong here?" Chinwa's lips pressed together, her hands gripping the edges of her desk. She did not respond. She had learned early that responding would only give them power. She focused instead on her work, her mind rehearsing equations and notes as if the words themselves could shield her. From the growing hostility, the morning continued with a strange tension in the air. Teachers began to notice the undercurrent as well. Mrs. Ibekwa, the English teacher, frowned during roll call as she observed students glancing toward Chin with thinly veiled amusement. Mr. Ez raised an eyebrow as a few boys snickered during class, trying, unsuccessfully, to disrupt her concentration. Even some students who admired Chinua hesitated to speak, fearful of crossing the invisible line of wealth and status that Adana had drawn around herself. Chinua was aware of all this, and yet, for every whisper and glance, she gathered a little more resolve. Then came the announcement that changed everything. During third period, the principal entered the hall with a crisp, commanding presence. "Students," she began, her voice cutting through the chatter like a knife, "next month we will be holding the annual Academic Excellence Competition. Every student from grade 11 must participate. Individual and group performances will be evaluated. Winners will have their names engraved on the school's Hall of Fame and receive a scholarship grant for the next academic year." The class erupted into murmurs, a mixture of excitement and panic. For Chinua, the words struck like a bell, signaling both opportunity and challenge. Here was her chance to prove herself, to demonstrate that her worth was not measured by wealth, designer clothes, or social status, but by her intellect, diligence, and creativity. Her heart beat faster, but there was no fear, only determination. She would show them all that a girl from a market stall could stand toe-to-toe with the children of millionaires. Adana naturally reacted differently. A sharp smile curved her lips, but it was not a smile of admiration. It was a smile of challenge, of entitlement, of quiet threat. She leaned toward her friends, whispering words Chinwai could not hear, yet the intensity of her gaze was unmistakable. She was already calculating how to maintain her superiority, how to ensure that Chinwa never had the chance to outshine her. And Chino across the room sensed it. Their silent battle had begun. At lunch, the school courtyard became the next arena. Students clustered in groups, discussing strategies, forming alliances, and inevitably spreading more rumors about Chinwa's market humiliation. Some laughed cruelly, while others whispered in awe at her calmness. Chinwa sat quietly under a mango tree, opening her lunchbox, her hands shaking slightly as she unpacked the modest meal her mother had prepared. A few classmates stared openly, pointing at her sandwich, her water bottle, her simple cloth napkin. They whispered, "She's still eating like she's in the market. Doesn't she know we have catered lunches?" Chinu ignored them. She remembered her mother's words, "Do not let their eyes dictate your soul. Let your actions speak louder than their words." She chewed slowly, deliberately, keeping her posture straight and her gaze forward. Some of the younger students, the ones who had not yet been swept into Adana's orbit, watched her curiously. There was a quiet admiration in their eyes. A subtle understanding that Chinwa's resilience was rare and inspiring. The competition announcement became the topic of every conversation. And it also marked the beginning of Adana's first real attempt at sabotage. That afternoon she approached Tren under the pretense of casual conversation. "So," she began sweetly, her voice dripping with false warmth, "are you really planning to compete? I mean, are you sure you belong in this contest?" Chinwo raised her eyes calmly, holding the edge of her notebook. "I belong wherever effort and preparation can take me," she replied evenly, careful not to show irritation. Adana's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered. "We'll see," she said, turning away, leaving Chin with a chill that lingered long after her retreat. The next few days were a blur of preparation and tension. Teachers assigned topics, reviewed progress, and encouraged all students to give their best. Chin worked quietly, staying after school to practice, taking notes and refining her presentation. She was meticulous, leaving nothing to chance, aware that any weakness could be exploited by those eager to maintain the status quo. Meanwhile, the whispers continued, carrying with them judgments from both students and some adults who found the market origin of her family scandalous. Even in the market, echoes of the humiliation lingered. A few neighbors who shopped there had recognized her from the Saturday incident. Some smiled at her courage. Others whispered questions about whether she could really fit in at her elite school. Mama Chinwa noticed her daughter's furrowed brow and whispered encouragement. "Remember who you are, Chinwa. Let them see your heart and your mind. That is your strength." Chin nodded, her resolve hardening. She could not erase the insult, but she could control her response. At school, tension escalated as students formed teams, exchanging opinions about who would dominate the competition. Adana positioned herself as the natural favorite, her friends orbiting her like satellites, offering whispered advice and helpful critiques aimed at undermining Shenhua. Every glance Adana threw was calculated, a reminder that wealth could intimidate even in intellectual arenas. Shenhua, however, used these glances as fuel, a reminder that triumph required focus, patience, and strategy. She spent evenings after school writing, revising, practicing, her mind rehearsing every step of her presentation with precision. A week later, the first day of preliminary rounds arrived. The gymnasium had been transformed into a stage, complete with podiums, projectors, and judges who included teachers and external academics. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Students lined up, shuffling papers nervously, exchanging quick greetings or scanning the competition for weaknesses. Chinua took a deep breath, adjusting her simple braid, reminding herself that her worth was not in their whispers, their stares, or the luxury of her competitors' attire, but in the preparation she had poured into every detail. Adana approached the stage with her usual confidence, her smile bright, her every movement precise. She glanced at Chenhua, then at the judges, then back again, as if calculating how to intimidate. Chenhua met her gaze without flinching. Around them the murmurs escalated. Some students whispered, "Watch her crumble," while others muttered, "Chine was calm. She's not scared." The dichotomy in opinions reflected the tension between expectation and reality. When the first presentations began, Chen observed quietly, taking notes in her mind, analyzing strengths and weaknesses, preparing herself for the moment she would take the stage. Each speaker delivered their work with skill, some faltering slightly, others shining. Qinhuo could feel the tension building inside her chest, a mixture of anticipation, nervousness, and a steady undercurrent of determination. When her turn finally arrived, she stepped forward confidently, her voice calm but firm, her eyes scanning the audience, and began presenting her work with clarity, intelligence, and quiet authority. The judges nodded, taking notes, some leaning forward in interest. Adana's friends whispered, "She's good." their tone betraying both surprise and begrudging admiration. When Xinhua concluded, there was a moment of silence, a pause so long it felt like the gym itself was holding its breath. Then the clap started, polite at first, then growing louder. Xinhua stepped back, feeling a surge of pride not for recognition, but for knowing she had stayed true to herself. Adana, watching, felt a flicker of panic for the first time. Her usual dominance, her carefully curated aura of invincibility, felt threatened. She realized that mockery, threats, and whispers could not intimidate Xinhua, only effort, preparation, and intellect could. And Xinhua had both in abundance. That afternoon, as the school bell rang and students streamed out, the whispers changed tone. No longer were they only jokes. They now contained admiration, curiosity, and even envy. Chen returned home that evening, exhausted but satisfied. She helped her mother arrange vegetables, smiled at neighbors, and reflected quietly on the day. The market incident was no longer only a memory of humiliation. It had become a catalyst, pushing her to rise higher, work harder, and prove that dignity and perseverance could overcome both wealth and cruelty. She did not yet know the full extent of the battles ahead. But she understood one thing clearly: she would not allow anyone, no matter their status, to dictate her worth. The following week, the atmosphere at Elite International College was electric. The whispers about the market incident had not faded. In fact, they had intensified. Students now followed Xinhua in the hallways, exchanging quiet speculations about her performance in the preliminary rounds. Some were curious, some were cautious, but all recognized that she had already shaken the expectations set by Adana and her circle. Meanwhile, Adana's pride, which had always been uncheckable, had been bruised. She was no longer merely the dominant figure. She was challenged. And the realization was bitter. Adana spent hours plotting subtle ways to undermine Xinhua, without drawing direct attention to herself. She knew that confronting her openly would only make Xinhua appear more heroic. Instead, she relied on whispers, small manipulations, and careful sabotage. Her first attempt came during history class. The teacher, Mr. Nlonquo, had assigned a research project to be submitted in 3 days, requiring both detailed notes and a short presentation. Adana saw an opportunity. She would borrow Xinhua's research notes, hoping to delete or misplace them. She waited until Xinhua stepped out for a bathroom break, then snatched the folder from her desk, slipping it into her designer bag. Chen returned, expecting her work to be untouched. The empty desk shocked her for a moment, but she quickly regained composure, refusing to panic. She searched nearby, then approached Mr. Nlonquo quietly, explaining the situation without anger, only stating the facts. The teacher's frown deepened. "Xinhua," he said, "I know you are diligent. We will get to the bottom of this. For now, you may submit an electronic copy." Qin nodded, grateful for his support but aware that she would have to redo hours of work overnight. That evening, she sat at the small wooden table in their kitchen, lit by a single bulb. Mama Qin worked nearby, chopping onions and carrots, humming softly. Xinhua typed and revised, determined not to let anyone, not Adana, not gossip, not circumstance, steal her moment. Her fingers moved quickly, eyes scanning her notes, rearranging ideas, and rehearsing her presentation. The smell of onions, the familiar sounds of the market beyond their window, the hum of electricity in the night, all of it became the soundtrack of her resolve. The next day, when Xinhua submitted her electronic work, the judges and teachers were impressed by the clarity, originality, and depth of her research. Even students who had expected her to stumble whispered in awe. Adana, observing from the back of the room, felt the first real sting of defeat. Her plan had failed, and now Xinhua's brilliance was visible to everyone, including those who previously dismissed her. Undeterred, Adana escalated her strategy. She decided to undermine Xinhua socially. She spread rumors that Xinhua had cheated, suggesting that her electronic submission had been copied from an online source. Some students were hesitant to believe it. Others whispered cautiously. Xinhua heard about the rumors quickly, but instead of confronting them with anger, she focused on evidence and preparation. She printed sources, cited her references meticulously, and prepared a small presentation demonstrating her work's originality. Her calmness in the face of deceit only made her appear stronger. And even a few of Adana's closest friends began to question their loyalties. Meanwhile, outside school, the market incident continued to ripple through the community. Local shoppers occasionally asked Mama Chenwa about her daughter, some expressing admiration for Xinhua's courage and dignity. "That girl has spirit," one older woman said, handing her a small packet of yams. "You are raising her well." Mama Chenwa smiled, pride shining in her eyes. She never boasted, but she often reminded Chenwa that character and determination mattered more than wealth, more than rumors, and more than the sting of humiliation. The competition's final stage approached rapidly. Chenwa had spent long nights preparing, fine-tuning both the research project and her oral presentation. Every detail was polished, every potential question anticipated. She rehearsed her posture, her tone, and her gestures, aware that the judges and students would notice even the smallest sign of hesitation. Adana, sensing that her dominance was slipping, attempted another form of sabotage. This time she bribed one of the janitorial staff to delay Chenwa's access to a projector, hoping to throw her off-balance moments before presenting. When the day arrived, the gymnasium buzzed with anticipation. Students filed in, parents and teachers in attendance, some curious, some critical. Chenwa arrived early, carrying her laptop, notes, and a quiet determination. She noticed Adana glancing toward her, a mixture of disdain and anxiety in her eyes. The preliminary rounds had already revealed that Xinhua's skill was undeniable. The tension now was about Adana's ability to control the narrative and maintain her social power. Chenwa set up. She noticed that the projector was not immediately functioning. Her heart raced for a moment, just enough to feel human, but she quickly problem-solved, connecting her laptop to an alternate port, adjusting the display settings, and ensuring that the presentation would proceed without interruption. Her calm and professionalism drew admiration from teachers and students alike, while Adana's smirk faded into visible panic. Her carefully orchestrated sabotage had failed once again when Chenwa began speaking. Her voice was steady, clear, and confident. She articulated her arguments, presented data, and shared insights with a poise that captivated everyone in the room. Adana's friends watched silently, their previous amusement replaced with concern. Teachers nodded appreciatively, some whispering to each other about Chenwa's composure and depth. Even students who had once doubted her were leaning forward, captivated by the precision and intelligence in her presentation. Adana, seeing the reaction, felt the first tremors of fear. She had underestimated Chenwa. Her usual tools, wealth, status, manipulation, were powerless here. Chenwa's intellect and poise created an invisible shield no amount of bullying could pierce. Adana tried to interrupt with a sharp question from the floor, attempting to cast doubt on Chenwa's conclusions, but Chenwa handled it gracefully, citing sources and providing clear, logical responses. The room fell silent as she spoke, the power dynamic shifting before everyone's eyes. When Chenwa concluded, the applause was thunderous. Some students clapped quietly. Others cheered openly. The judges, impressed by her originality, rigor, and delivery, gave her the highest score of the day. Chenwa stepped down from the podium, her heart racing not with pride, but with quiet satisfaction. She had stayed true to herself and triumphed without compromising her values. Adana, on the other hand, stormed out of the gymnasium as soon as the results were announced. Her friends followed silently, their earlier confidence replaced with embarrassment. The humiliation she had once inflicted on Chenwa now mirrored her own. For the first time, she felt powerless, not physically, not socially, but morally and intellectually. The truth had a way of leveling even the tallest towers. The following days were a mix of admiration for Chenwa's subtle resentment from Adana. Students who had mocked her before now whispered words of encouragement or simply stared in quiet awe. Even teachers began to treat her with a new respect, acknowledging that her diligence and resilience had not only overcome social prejudice, but also the subtle sabotage attempted by peers. Chenwa, ever humble, thanked her teachers quietly and continued her work, refusing to gloat or demean anyone, even those who had wronged her. Yet the story was far from over. Adana, unable to accept her defeat gracefully, began planning her next move. She realized that if she wanted to regain her sense of control, she would need more than whispers or small tricks. She needed to humiliate Qinghua publicly, to remind everyone that wealth and status could still dominate intellect and effort. The plan she began forming involved not just the school, but the community. And it would test both Qinhua's composure and her mother's guidance in ways they could not yet foresee. Meanwhile, Qinhua's mother noticed the strain on her daughter. Even though Qinghua carried herself with calm determination, Mama Qinhua saw the subtle weight of constant scrutiny and whispered gossip. "Qinhua," she said one evening while arranging vegetables, "remember that strength is not just in winning, but in how you carry yourself through trials. They can mock you, challenge you, even try to undermine you, but nothing can touch your dignity unless you allow it." Qinhua nodded, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and resolve. She had learned that true victory was measured not in applause or recognition, but in the quiet certainty that she had remained honest and true. As the school days passed, whispers about the market incident became intertwined with tales of her academic excellence. Students who had once laughed now watched her in awe. Teachers praised her work, students asked for advice, and the school itself began to recognize that Qinhua's journey was extraordinary. Every day she faced subtle hostility from Adana or her friends, but each day she countered it with patience, intellect, and quiet confidence. By the end of the week, it was clear to everyone that the competition had shifted from merely academic performance to a clash of character, resolve, and social power. Qinhua had proven that effort, intelligence, and dignity could outshine arrogance, wealth, and cruelty. And while the final rounds of the competition were still ahead, a new balance of respect, grudging or earned, had begun to emerge. Adana, meanwhile, wrestled with a growing sense of desperation. Realizing that her usual tactics were no longer sufficient, the market incident, once a source of humiliation, had become the catalyst for transformation. Qinhua now understood that adversity could be converted into strength, and that the whispers, the stares, and the subtle sabotage were mere tests of her resilience. She had survived them with grace, and each victory, whether big or small, reinforced the lessons her mother had taught her. Dignity cannot be bought, and respect must be earned through effort, character, and perseverance. By the time the weekend arrived, Qinhua had a small sense of quiet triumph. She helped her mother at the stall, smiled at neighbors, and even laughed lightly at some of the absurd whispers circulating around town. The market, the school, and the gossip had all become stages on which she proved herself, not for anyone else's recognition but for her own inner conviction. She had faced ridicule, manipulation, and subtle sabotage. As she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. In those days, the bond between mother and daughter deepened. Mama Qinhua often reminded her, "The world will test you, Qinhua, in ways you cannot predict. But never forget, your heart, your mind, and your actions are your armor. Keep them strong and no one can take your dignity." Qinhua absorbed the words like sunlight, knowing that the coming weeks would present even greater challenges. But confident that she could face them, the stage was now set for an even greater confrontation, a test that would demand not only her intellect but her courage, composure, and ability to forgive or strategically respond to those who had sought to harm her. Adana's envy had grown into a dangerous determination, and the whispers of the market, once distant, now intertwined with the power struggles within the school itself. Qinghua's journey was only beginning, and every step forward was a demonstration of the quiet, unyielding power of resilience. The following Monday, Elite International College was buzzing with anticipation. The preliminary rounds of the annual academic excellence competition had concluded, and the final rounds were scheduled to take place in the coming week. Word of Qinhua's brilliance had spread like wildfire, drawing both admiration and envy. Even students who had previously ignored her now whispered her name, sometimes with awe, sometimes with disbelief. Adana, however, had become increasingly restless. Her usual poise and confidence were fraying at the edges, replaced by frustration and a growing sense of urgency. She knew that if she did not act decisively, Chinu's rising popularity and recognition would leave her powerless. Humiliated in the very environment she had long dominated, Adana's first move that week was subtle but calculated. She began circulating rumors suggesting that Chinua had received illicit assistance from a tutor outside school. These whispers were carefully phrased, never directly accusing Chinua but designed to plant doubt in the minds of teachers and judges. "I heard she got a private mentor to help with her research," one of Adana's friends whispered during lunch, loud enough for a few students to overhear. Chinua, overhearing the conversation, took a deep breath and reminded herself that the truth was her strongest weapon. She did not respond publicly. Instead, she focused on her preparation, allowing her work to speak louder than any rumor. Despite the mental weight of these orchestrated attacks, Chinua maintained her routine. She woke before dawn, helped her mother with the market stall, then hurried to school with her books in hand, reviewing notes along the way. Her classmates could see the calm determination in her eyes, even as Adana's subtle manipulations continued. Some students admired her fortitude, while others, influenced by Adana's whispers, hesitated to offer support. The atmosphere was tense, and the social dynamics within the school had become a battlefield where intellect, character, and social power collided. As the week progressed, Adana escalated her tactics. She sought to create tangible obstacles that would undermine Chinua's performance in the upcoming final round. One afternoon, she approached a maintenance staff member with a seemingly innocent request. "Could you delay access to the science lab for Chinua's group? She's so confident. It would be funny to see her struggle." The staff member hesitated, aware of the potential consequences, but Adana's persuasive charm and subtle threats convinced him to comply. Chinua, however, did not falter. When she discovered the delay, she calmly restructured her plan, finding alternative spaces to practice and reorganizing her team's schedule. Her resourcefulness turned a potential setback into a demonstration of resilience. Meanwhile, the market incident continued to resonate beyond the school walls. Local traders and neighbors had heard of Chinua's rising recognition and whispered stories of her victory and composure. "That girl has courage," one woman remarked, handing her a small bag of fresh greens. "No one could have treated her like that and stayed so calm." Mama Chinua smiled, proud yet cautious, reminding her daughter that public recognition was fleeting, but character endured. These words fortified Chinua's resolve, reminding her that true strength was measured not by applause, but by the dignity with which she faced adversity. As the final round approached, tension in the school reached its peak. Adana, feeling cornered, resorted to more direct tactics. During a group study session in the library, she covertly swapped pages of Chinua's printed research with incorrect information, hoping to create confusion and embarrassment during her presentation. Chinua, arriving early, noticed the subtle discrepancies and calmly corrected them. Her attention to detail and meticulous preparation had created a buffer against manipulation. And each small victory further solidified her confidence. The day of the final round arrived, bringing with it a heightened sense of anticipation and anxiety. The gymnasium had been transformed into a formal stage, complete with podiums, projectors, and seating for judges, teachers, parents, and students. The audience buzzed with whispers and speculation, eager to witness the culmination of weeks of preparation, rivalry, and tension. Chinua arrived early, carrying her laptop, notes, and quiet determination. She set up her presentation with practiced precision, double-checking every detail, aware that her performance would be scrutinized not only for content but for composure under pressure. Adana, observing from the back, was visibly tense. Her usual confidence was replaced by anxiety, a stark contrast to her public demeanor. She whispered instructions to her friends, reminding them to watch for mistakes, to spread subtle doubts, and to ensure that Chinua faced as much social pressure as possible. The stakes were high. Failure to undermine Chinua would mean a loss of status, influence, and control over the narrative within the school. When the presentations began, Chinua's approach was methodical and confident. She delivered her content with clarity, precision, and an undeniable command of her material. Her voice was steady, her gestures deliberate, and her focus unwavering. Judges nodded appreciatively, some exchanging impressed glances, while students listened intently, captivated by her intellect and poise. Adana's attempts at disruption, subtle whispers, questioning glances, and orchestrated distractions failed to penetrate Chunwa's composure. Each interruption was met with calm correction or a return to the core argument, demonstrating mastery over both content and circumstance. By the midpoint of the presentations, it was clear that Xin was the standout performer. Her research was original, her delivery engaging, and her responses to questions insightful and well-reasoned. Even students who had been influenced by Adana's rumors began to reassess their opinions, whispering among themselves about Chunwa's capabilities and determination. The whispers, once mocking, had shifted to admiration. A subtle acknowledgement that intellect and character could outshine status and wealth. Adana, realizing that her strategies were failing, became increasingly desperate. During a brief break, she attempted one final act of sabotage. She moved to tamper with the projector connections, hoping to create a technical failure that would disrupt Chunwa's final presentation. Chinu, arriving early for the second half of her presentation, noticed the irregularity and calmly reconnected the cables, ensuring that the equipment functioned correctly. Her quick thinking prevented potential embarrassment and reinforced the perception of her competence and resilience. When Chunwa delivered her final presentation, she did so with a quiet confidence that commanded attention. Her arguments were structured, evidence-based, and persuasive, and she handled questions from judges and audience members with poise and clarity. Each response demonstrated not only knowledge but also an ability to remain composed under scrutiny and pressure. The room was captivated, with murmurs of admiration replacing the whispers of doubt and mockery that had previously surrounded her. Adana's panic became visible. Her friends exchanged anxious glances, realizing that the power dynamics had shifted irreversibly. Chunwa's performance, coupled with her unwavering dignity in the face of repeated sabotage attempts, had not only neutralized Adana's strategies but had elevated her status within the school. Teachers whispered approvingly, students watched in awe, and even the judges acknowledged the remarkable composure and skill she displayed. Outside the school, the market continued to serve as a grounding force for Chunwa. Her mother, Mama Chunwa, reminded her daily that recognition was temporary but character endured. "People will talk," she said, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency, "but your actions, your diligence, and your integrity are what truly matter. Keep them strong, and no one can take your dignity." Chunwa absorbed the words, feeling their weight and truth. They reinforced her resolve to remain humble, focused, and unyielding. Even as the social dynamics around her continued to shift. As the final results were announced, it became clear that Chunwa had emerged as the victor of the academic excellence competition. Her scores were the highest, her presentation the most compelling, and her conduct exemplary. Students applauded, teachers nodded in approval, and whispers of admiration filled the hallways. Chunwa stepped down from the podium, her heart calm but her mind racing with quiet satisfaction. She had faced relentless challenges, rumors, sabotage, and the weight of social hierarchy, as she had triumphed not through manipulation or aggression, but through preparation, composure, and integrity. Adana's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She stormed out of the gymnasium, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. Her friends followed silently, aware that their influence and status had been challenged and, in some ways, diminished. Adana's carefully curated image of superiority had been punctured, and the realization of her vulnerability was painful. Chunwa, observing silently, felt no triumph in her rival's defeat. Instead, she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served through effort, resilience, and dignity. In the days that followed, the social dynamics at Elite International College continued to evolve. Students who had once whispered or mocked now sought guidance, collaboration, or simple acknowledgement from Chunwa. Teachers treated her with increased respect, recognizing not only her intellect but also her ability to navigate complex social pressures with grace. Adana, meanwhile, wrestled with the consequences of her actions and the realization that wealth and status could not guarantee control or respect. Chunwa's victories extended beyond academic recognition. Her approach to adversity, calm, strategic, and ethical, had set an example for peers, demonstrating that dignity and integrity could overcome even the most carefully orchestrated social attacks. The market incident, once a source of humiliation, had become a symbol of resilience, a reminder that true strength is revealed not in wealth or status, but in character and perseverance. By the end of the week, Chinua had returned to her routine, helping her mother at the market, preparing for upcoming school activities, and reflecting quietly on the lessons of the past weeks. The balance of power within the school had shifted, but Chinua remained humble, understanding that recognition and success were transient, while integrity and perseverance endured. She had learned that adversity could be transformed into opportunity, that manipulation could be neutralized through preparation and composure, and that true strength lies in the ability to remain dignified in the face of hostility. Adana, observing from the periphery, became increasingly aware of the limits of her influence. Her attempts to humiliate or undermine Shinwei failed repeatedly, and her social power within the school was diminishing. The realization was bitter, a humbling experience that forced her to confront not only her own arrogance, but also the undeniable truth. Chunwa's resilience, intelligence, and character were forces that could not be bought, bullied, or bribed. The market incident, the whispers, the sabotage, and the competition had converged into a crucible of experience for both girls. Chen emerged stronger, her resolve hardened, her confidence validated, and her integrity intact. She had proven that effort, diligence, and moral courage could overcome status, privilege, and cruelty. And while challenges would continue to arise, Chinua now faced them with the knowledge that her strength, rooted in character and perseverance, was unassailable. Absolutely. Continuing your story in the same dramatic style. This part focuses on the climax, Adana's desperation peaks, Chinua's ultimate triumph, public recognition, and the tension approaching resolution. The days leading up to the final ceremony of the academic excellence competition were filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. For Chinua, every morning felt like stepping into a new arena. She continued her routine, waking before dawn to help her mother at the market, balancing vegetables and coins with a sense of rhythm and purpose. She rehearsed her speeches, polished her notes, and reflected quietly on the weeks of preparation, sabotage, and whispered judgments. She had grown stronger, not only academically but emotionally, learning to meet every attempt at humiliation with calm intelligence and measured patience. Adana, however, was unraveling. Her previous strategies had failed repeatedly, and the humiliation she had suffered during the final rounds gnawed at her. The whispers about Chinua's brilliance, composure, and resilience had spread across classrooms, teachers' lounges, and even into the local community. Adana could no longer rely solely on wealth and status to maintain her dominance. Every glance at Chunwa now brought a mix of envy, fear, and desperation. She was determined to regain control, no matter the cost. Her next plan was bold, risky, and public. During the final ceremony, she intended to expose Chinua as a fraud in front of the entire school, teachers, students, and parents alike. She had gathered what she believed was proof of academic dishonesty, mostly circumstantial evidence and manipulated data, and she prepared a sharp, accusatory speech to deliver at the podium before Chinua could be recognized. The goal was simple: humiliate Chinua publicly, reassert her own superiority, and ensure that the whispers of admiration turned back into ridicule. On the day of the ceremony, the gymnasium was filled to capacity. Students whispered eagerly, parents scanned the audience for familiar faces, and teachers exchanged knowing glances. The stage was set with rows of chairs for the judges and a podium decorated with flowers and the school emblem. Every detail had been meticulously prepared for the culmination of the competition. Chin arrived early, tearing her notes and laptop, her posture steady, her gaze calm. She noticed Adana sitting in the front row, her expression a mixture of forced composure and barely contained anxiety. When the ceremony began, Chinwa's heart remained steady, though anticipation hummed beneath the surface. The judges praised the students for their efforts, acknowledging the talent and diligence displayed throughout the competition. When it was Chinwa's turn, she stepped confidently to the podium, her eyes scanning the audience, her hands steady on the notes she had prepared. Adana's plan was clear in her mind, a sudden accusation, a dramatic reveal, but Chinwa, focused entirely on her presentation, did not see it coming. Chinwa delivered her final presentation flawlessly. Her speech was articulate, her examples precise, and her insights profound. She answered questions with intelligence and grace, and the audience, including parents and teachers, responded with admiration. When she concluded, a round of applause filled the room. Some students clapped quietly, others cheered openly, and the judges exchanged nods of approval. Chinwa stepped down from the podium, feeling a deep satisfaction, not in the applause, but in knowing she had remained true to herself and her work. Adana, watching from her seat, realized that the moment to strike had arrived. She stood abruptly, clutching her papers, and moved toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice sharp, "I must reveal a shocking truth about Chinwa's work." A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the front as whispers of curiosity rippled through the crowd. Adana continued, attempting to cast doubt on Chinwa's integrity, but her words lacked the confidence they once had. Her carefully constructed accusations seemed fragile against the undeniable evidence of Chinwa's thorough preparation. Her flawless presentation, and the quiet, steady aura of competence she exuded, Chinwa, observing calmly, did not interrupt. She knew that any emotional reaction would only give Adana power. Instead, she allowed the audience, teachers, and judges to witness the contrast between arrogance and resilience. When Adana's accusations faltered under questioning, Chin responded with clarity and composure, providing citations, demonstrating her research process, and calmly rebutting every point. Her poise and intelligence shone like a beacon, and the audience began to murmur, their skepticism of Adana's claims growing with every word. The judges, fully aware of the attempt at sabotage, intervened politely but firmly. "We have reviewed all evidence," one judge announced, "and we find Chinwa's work to be original, well-researched, and in full compliance with academic standards." The words struck like a hammer against Adana's fragile plans. The room erupted into applause, louder and more genuine than before. Students who had whispered doubts now watched in admiration, and even some of Adana's closest friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Adana's face reddened, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to regain control. But the more she struggled, the more evident her desperation became. The narrative had shifted irreversibly. The girl she had attempted to humiliate, the market girl she had mocked, whispered about, and sabotaged, now stood victorious in intellect, character, and composure. Every attempt to undermine Chinwa had been neutralized, and the truth was undeniable. Chinwa stepped forward, addressing the audience with a calm, confident smile. "I want to thank my teachers, my classmates, and my mother," she began, her voice steady and clear. "This journey has not been easy. I have faced challenges, whispers, and attempts to undermine me. But I have learned that true strength lies in preparation, integrity, and resilience. Humility, effort, and perseverance can overcome arrogance and manipulation." Her words resonated deeply, silencing any remaining murmurs. The applause that followed was thunderous, heartfelt, and sustained. Adana, finally realizing the depth of her defeat, slumped into her chair. Her plan had collapsed in front of the entire school. Every whisper of doubt, every attempt at sabotage, every sneer she had directed at Chinwa now reflected back upon her. For the first time, she experienced the raw humiliation she had tried to inflict on someone else. Chinwa, however, did not gloat. She recognized the pain in her rival's eyes, and instead of responding with cruelty, she maintained her composure. A silent testament to her strength, the aftermath of the ceremony extended beyond the gymnasium. Students and teachers alike spoke of Chinwa's courage, resilience, and brilliance. The whispers of the market incident were reframed as part of a larger story, a story of triumph over adversity, of dignity prevailing over cruelty, and of intellect and effort conquering status and manipulation. Even parents in the audience were impressed, recognizing that Chinwa's journey had transcended the competition itself, becoming a lesson in character, perseverance, and ethical victory. Back at the market, Mama Xinhua noticed the change immediately. Customers approached the stall with congratulatory smiles, commenting on the school recognition and Xinhua's composure. "Your daughter is extraordinary," one woman remarked, handing her a small packet of vegetables. Mama Xinhua smiled, pride shining in her eyes, and reminded Xinhua gently, "Remember, my child, the world will always test you. But it is how you respond, with integrity and patience, that defines true victory." Qing nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude, understanding that her mother's words had guided her through every challenge. Adana, meanwhile, faced the consequences of her actions. Teachers began to address her attempts at sabotage, emphasizing the importance of integrity, respect, and humility. Students, too, recognized the shift in power dynamics. No longer could wealth or status alone command respect. Adana's influence waned as her attempts to dominate intellectually and socially had been thwarted. She became quieter, reflective, and for the first time, aware of the consequences of arrogance and cruelty. Xinhua's victory became a turning point not just for herself, but for the school environment as a whole. Students who had previously engaged in mockery or whispered gossip began to reassess their behavior, understanding that effort, character, and integrity held more value than status or material wealth. Teachers noted the change as well, recognizing that Xinhua had set a new standard, one where diligence, preparation, and composure were respected above all else. In the weeks that followed, Xinhua continued her routine with calm determination. She returned to the market each day, helping her mother, managing the stall, and reflecting quietly on the lessons she had learned. The competition had ended, the applause had faded, and the whispers had transformed into admiration. Xinhua had proven not only her intellectual capabilities but also her capacity for resilience, humility, and grace. The bond between mother and daughter deepened during this period. Mama Qin reminded Xinhua daily that true strength was measured not by external recognition but by inner integrity. "The world will always test you," she said one afternoon, arranging fresh tomatoes on the stall. "But if you remain true to yourself, no one can diminish your worth." Xinhua absorbed the words like sunlight, feeling fortified and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Adana, now faced with the reality of her defeat, began to reflect on her own behavior. The public humiliation, coupled with the undeniable brilliance and composure of Xinhua, forced her to confront the consequences of arrogance and cruelty. She realized that wealth and status could not replace character, diligence, or ethical conduct. The lessons were bitter, but necessary. By the end of the month, the school had settled into a new rhythm. Qin was recognized not only as the winner of the academic excellence competition but also as a symbol of resilience, dignity, and integrity. Her story became a source of inspiration, a narrative demonstrating that obstacles, whether social, economic, or manipulative, could be overcome through preparation, perseverance, and character. In the market, life returned to its steady rhythm. Xinhua continued to help her mother, balancing vegetables and coins with practiced skill, her heart calm but her mind sharp. The whispers of past humiliation had transformed into admiration, respect, and acknowledgement of her journey. Xinhua had proven that true power lies not in wealth, status, or social manipulation, but in integrity, effort, and the ability to face adversity with grace. Even Adana, observing from the periphery, began to change. Her arrogance diminished, replaced by reflection and a cautious humility. She had witnessed firsthand that manipulation and cruelty could never triumph over diligence, composure, and ethical conduct. And while the journey for both girls was far from over, the events of the past weeks had reshaped their world, a world where character now commanded respect. Above all else, the weeks following the academic excellence competition brought a profound transformation to both Xinhua's world and the wider school community. Her victory had not only demonstrated her intellectual prowess but had quietly reshaped social dynamics at elite international college. Students who had once whispered mockery or passed judgment now approached her with respect, seeking guidance or simply acknowledging her achievements. Teachers spoke of her composure and resilience as examples for future generations, And even the administration used her story to inspire younger students. Chinwa's triumph had become more than a personal victory. It had become a symbol of diligence, courage, and integrity. Back at the market, life moved in its familiar rhythm. Chen helped her mother arrange fresh vegetables, balance coins, and greet customers with a warm smile. The familiar smells of yams, peppers, and cassava blended with the soft hum of early morning chatter. To many it was a simple life, yet for Chenhua it had become a place of grounding and reflection. The market had once been the scene of humiliation, a place where she had been mocked by Adana and watched by an amused crowd. But now it symbolized resilience, the strength of character, and the quiet power that came from staying true to oneself despite the weight of societal judgment. Mama Chenhua, ever observant and wise, often reminded her daughter of the lessons hidden within these daily routines. "Chinhua," she said one morning, handing her a basket of freshly picked vegetables, "people will always try to challenge you, to diminish you, or to test your patience. But no matter what they say or do, it is your response that defines who you are. Remember that dignity and effort cannot be stolen. They are yours, and they will shine brighter than any mockery or cruelty." Chinhua did, feeling the truth of her mother's words settle deeply within her. Every struggle, every whisper, and every attempt at sabotage had been a test, one she had passed with grace, resilience, and intelligence. Adana, once the unchallenged queen of the school hierarchy, had undergone her own quiet transformation. The repeated failures of her manipulations and the public exposure of her schemes forced her to confront the consequences of arrogance, envy, and cruelty. She became more introspective, less confrontational, and more cautious in her actions. Though the embarrassment and humiliation she endured were painful, they served as a harsh but necessary lesson in empathy, integrity, and respect. Over time, she learned that influence built on fear or status was fleeting, while true respect could only be earned through honesty, effort, and humility. The school environment, too, began to reflect the changes that Chenhua's journey had inspired. Teachers noted that students were more collaborative, less inclined to ridicule their peers, and increasingly focused on genuine effort rather than social maneuvering. Class discussions became richer, and the culture shifted toward one that valued preparation, diligence, and ethical conduct. Chinhua's story, her journey from public humiliation at the market to triumph in the school's most prestigious competition, became a touchstone for this transformation. It reminded everyone that true strength is measured not by wealth, status, or outward appearances, but by character, resilience, and moral courage. Chenhua herself continued to live with humility and focus, never allowing accolades to cloud her perspective. She understood that recognition, while gratifying, was fleeting. What mattered was the integrity with which she approached every challenge.
Her daily routines, helping at the market, studying, assisting classmates, and supporting her mother, remained grounded in the principles that had carried her through every obstacle. She learned to celebrate small victories, maintain patience in adversity, and approach every situation with thoughtful reflection. The market, once a site of ridicule, had transformed into a symbol of her strength. Regular customers, neighbors, and local traders often commented on Chenhua's composure, work ethic, and intellect. Some who had witnessed the original humiliation now expressed admiration for her perseverance and humility. It was in this environment, a blend of simplicity, authenticity, and daily effort, that Chenhua internalized the full meaning of her journey. She understood that real triumph was not in public applause or fleeting recognition, but in the ability to endure trials with dignity, to learn from every setback, and to emerge stronger with every challenge faced. Over time, the story of Chenhua and Adana became a quiet legend within the school. Students recounted the market incident, the whispered rumors, the sabotage, and the final triumph, not as gossip but as a lesson. It was a narrative that illustrated the power of resilience, the futility of envy, and the importance of moral integrity. Teachers often referenced it in their lessons on character, emphasizing that true success is built not on the diminishment of others, but on the elevation of one's own effort, courage, and perseverance. Even Adana eventually approached Chinwo privately, a gesture of reconciliation and humility. The conversation was brief, awkward, yet meaningful. Adana admitted her envy and her misguided attempts to undermine Chenwei, acknowledging the lessons she had learned about integrity, respect, and empathy. Chenhua, embodying the calm and generosity that had defined her throughout the trials, accepted the apology without malice, reinforcing the lesson that forgiveness, composure, and moral strength were far more powerful than vengeance or resentment. The moral of Chinwo's journey crystallized in the months that followed. She had faced ridicule, manipulation, and social prejudice, yet she emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever. Her intellect, preparation, and unwavering integrity had neutralized every attempt to undermine her, and in doing so, she had become a symbol of hope and inspiration. Her story proved that adversity, when met with resilience and moral courage, can be transformed into a powerful force for personal growth and social influence. Chinhua's legacy extended beyond her immediate circle. Her classmates began to emulate her focus, diligence, and humility. Younger students looked up to her as a role model, and even the broader community, aware of her achievements, celebrated her as a beacon of perseverance and ethical triumph. The story of a market girl who had been mocked, who had endured subtle sabotage, and who had risen to academic prominence resonated with many, demonstrating the universal power of determination, integrity, and courage. In the quiet moments, Qin reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She remembered the initial humiliation at the market, the whispers at school, the subtle sabotages, and the intense pressure of competition. Each obstacle had been a crucible, shaping her character and fortifying her resolve. She had learned that true strength is not the absence of hardship, but the ability to navigate challenges with dignity, intelligence, and patience. And most importantly, she had discovered that integrity and perseverance are forces more enduring than wealth, status, or outward appearances. As she walked through the bustling market with her mother, helping to arrange fresh produce, Chinhua felt a profound sense of balance. The journey from ridicule to triumph had been arduous, yet it had revealed the depth of her inner strength. She understood now that life's challenges, no matter how public or humiliating, could be overcome through effort, resilience, and moral courage. The market, once a stage of humiliation, had become a sanctuary of reflection, growth, and empowerment. The story of Chenhua and Adana, the market humiliation, the competition, and the ultimate reconciliation became more than just a tale of personal triumph. It became a lesson for the school, the community, and everyone who heard it. It reminded all who encountered it that character, diligence, and integrity are enduring sources of strength, that true respect is earned, and that humility and perseverance will always outshine arrogance, envy, and cruelty. In the end, Chinhua's journey was a testament to the transformative power of resilience, the quiet force of dignity, and the lasting impact of integrity. She had faced challenges designed to diminish her, yet she had emerged not only victorious but also wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. Her story would continue to inspire, a living reminder that true strength is measured not by wealth or status, but by courage, perseverance, and the grace with which one navigates the trials of life. And so, the market girl who had once been mocked, the student who had faced sabotage, the young woman who had risen above whispers and envy, Chen became a symbol, a legend, and a guiding light, proving to everyone that the measure of a person is found not in the cruelty of others, but in the dignity, resilience, and integrity they carry through life. If Chinhua's journey taught us anything, it's that true strength doesn't come from wealth, status, or the power to mock others. It comes from resilience, integrity, and the courage to rise above every challenge. From the market where she was humiliated to the school stage where she proved her brilliance, Chinhua showed us all that dignity and perseverance can outshine cruelty and envy. Every obstacle she faced, every whisper, every attempt at sabotage became a stepping stone to her ultimate triumph. And now, her story lives on as a reminder that character is the most powerful force of all. If you felt inspired by Shinwa's courage and want to witness more incredible stories of triumph, betrayal, and redemption, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us for the next episode because the journey of hope, justice, and resilience is just beginning.